This is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Here with me is my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Daily News.
You know their musicals. Of course, they're some of the greatest musicals ever written for Broadway. On the Town, Wonderful Town, Bells Are Ringing, Peter Pan. We are delighted tonight to be joined by Betty Comden and Adolph Green. Welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You've got a book out, The New York Musicals of Comden and Green, published by Applause, which we'll just flash here on the screen. Now, you guys are both from New York, correct? You're both born and raised?
Yes, I'm from Brooklyn. And I'm from the Bronx.
So you didn't have to travel too far to start your careers on Broadway, right?
Oh, except we had to travel those billions of impossible miles.
Well, let's talk about those billions of impossible miles when you were first starting out. On the Town was the first show.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You were kids.
Yes, well, relatively.
Yes. Yeah.
Mozart-wise, not that young. But we had been a sort of a strange club act for many years, 5 years.
Almost 5 down at the Village Vanguard, right?
Before
On the Town, all that was.
Oh, yes.
Right. With Judy
Holliday. And we were a much admired act. A lot of people were crazy about us, but somehow, since there were so many of us, and it was, I guess, on a higher level than ordinary, we're pioneers of being at a somewhat higher level, we got booked only sporadically.
Very sporadically.
Yes.
New York, we did quite well. Out of town, forget it, really. It was a disaster.
Yeah. Disaster in terms of bookings, or just the show didn't go over well?
It didn't go over once we got the bookings. It was very hard because we had, at one point, we played on a New Year's Eve and were fired after the first show. I mean, they didn't even get through the whole evening. Yeah. But it was fairly sophisticated, very funny, and we wrote sketches and songs.
Some of which we
still do them.
Still do. And it was a hell of an act, just impossible to classify for a lot of people.
Hard to call it an act, but that's really where we began to write and perform
I was
at the
say,
same
that must have been a great training ground for you, though, to be doing a review. And were you writing fast and writing all the time? And if you needed a new sketch, you had only a few minutes to put it together. And
well, there was pressure, sure.
Yeah.
It was good. And we learned a lot.
No, they were pretty carefully written, actually. Yeah.
And I think we thought of ourselves more as performers than writers.
Right.
Really?
Because we wrote in order to have something to perform, since we couldn't afford to pay royalties to anybody else. So we said, well, let's chip in and buy a pencil and write.
How did the first full-length musical then come about, On the Town?
We were friends of Leonard Bernstein's.
He was a very old, dear friend of mine. And
then we met at the Vanguard, and he became a close friend. He knew our material so well that when we'd forget a lyric, we'd call him up and say, and he remembered everything.
He always
every word.
Yes.
Everything. And then one spring, Leonard and Jerry Robbins did that great
thing called Fancy
ballet. And that was a big hit. And then the idea came of doing, for the two of them to do a full-length show. And Lenny said the people to write the book and lyrics are us. Yeah. They didn't know us particularly, but Oliver Smith and Jerome, whom we also didn't know, came to see us. We were performing at the Blue Angel, reduced to an act of two. And then Lenny came and brought them, and then we got the job. So that's how that started.
Did your first show come easy to you, or was it a struggle to learn how to write a book to a big Broadway musical?
Well, no, it was a struggle to write at all. It wasn't. We learned as we went along.
We've never written ballads or songs with emotion because we wrote satirical numbers, comedy songs, and sketches. That's all. So this was the first time to write songs with heart.
It wasn't that easy to come by, but the whole thing was written in a period of less than 5 months. So whatever we learned fast. And
then the thing that made it a reality was the entrance of George Abbott, who always loved to work with young people, and he knew Leonard and he knew Jerome because of the success of Fancy Free, and he was crazy about them. And he loved Lenny's music. He used to call it that Prokofiev stuff.
Give us some more of that,
And but he didn't know us, Adolph, and so he read a version. Well, anyway, there was the first version of the book was terrible, and we were rewriting it when he came in And we had the thrill of giving him this copy to take home. And when he got on the train and went to Sands Point, we were waiting, and he called us when he got home, and he said he wanted to jump off the train and call us because it was so wonderful. Right. So that was so
Well,
great.
You guys were in the show.
Yeah, then we had to audition for him.
Oh, you had to audition?
No kidding.
Yes.
When you were writing, did you think you were writing for yourselves? You were definitely going to be a part
we
of
hoped.
it.
We picked those two parts, and we
Yeah.
were determined to get those parts.
Yeah.
There was a certain amount of reluctance to us, but that was quickly overcome when Abbott said sure.
Oh, right. So you passed the audition.
Can they talk? He said.
They can write, but can they speak?
Yeah. He learned I could sing very loudly, and Betty could sing very well. Yes.
Manhattan women are dressed in silk and satin, or so the fellas say. There's just one thing that's important in Manhattan. When you have just one day, gotta pick up a date.
Maybe 7
or 8
on your way.
In just one day. New York, New York, a hell of a town. The Bronx is up, but the battery's down. The people ride in a hole in the ground. New York, New York,
New York.
it's a hell of a town.
But your careers then went off into a different direction. I mean, you became writers.
Yeah.
But there must have been a part of you, though, that wanted to keep up with the acting, to be the performer.
Of course.
What happened? Why didn't it go that way?
I think we made choices there. You know, we didn't want to be constrained by the subject matter to always have parts for ourselves. It was pretty much that. The next show we started right away because we thought the first one was a fluke, and we gave no thought to performing in that. There was a show that was not a big success, but it's one we're proud of called $1 Billion Baby, which influenced a lot of people, and it was kind of it's a succès d'estime, which means it closed.
But historians love it.
Then we did go off on a different tack until we decided to do this evening of our own material. But much later on, 59, I think, was the first time we did it.
And it felt very good indeed.
Yeah, we loved doing it.
And the Theatre Guild brought us uptown. We were
That was a big hit.
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
smash.
big hit.
Big
And then we did
smash,
it again in the end
Yeah.
of 1978.
Yes, quite a few years later. And then we went to Hollywood at some fairly early point and started writing movies. We ended up writing 8 or 9 of them, including Singing in the Rain.
And Good News.
Good News was out first.
Right.
We weren't happy about that.
But you wrote the French song, right?
French lesson.
The French
right.
lesson.
The book, le livre,
The livre, the book.
the pen, la plume,
La plume, the pen.
la chaise,
La chaise.
le crayon,
Le crayon.
le cahier,
Le cahier.
le papier,
Le papier.
rouge, noir et blanc, a red, black and white.
Rouge, blanc et noir.
You're fairly bright. Now, please go back.
I'll bet I get them right. Rouge, blanc et noir, le papier, le crayon, le crayon, la chaise, la plume, le livre est rouge, la chaise est noire.
That's wonderful.
You call this work, it's more like play. In no time flat, you parle français.
Had enough?
No, just beginning.
I guess it looks better to us now in case we see it on television every once in a while than it did then.
We were a little ashamed of it then.
Yeah.
Really?
In
Why?
our act, and when we do our evening together, we say that the 3 greats of movie history: Birth of a Nation, Potemkin, and Good News.
Are you guys disciplined writers? Were you always disciplined writers? You work. We had Candor Neb on not long ago, and they said they meet every day and they write. And is that the way you do it too?
Yeah.
The only way you
Yes,
can do it.
We meet every day.
Shirley.
Yeah.
And since, well, they rarely do the book or they don't do both.
No, they don't.
But since we do both, we certainly have to meet
You do the book
fairly
and lyrics.
intensively.
Book and lyrics,
yes.
almost all the time.
Yeah.
Where do you meet?
Usually my house.
Betty's.
I have most of our papers and records and things to refer to. So we just get there and meet.
And how does it work? You just bounce ideas off each other, or you roam the halls and.
Very boring to watch. People say, we want to photograph you working. You know,
You just picture two people groaning.
Or staring at each other. Full of action. Yeah.
But if you could just sort of take us into the room, though. I mean, you guys have read the greatest musicals of all time. How do you do it? What's the magic?
You want some coffee or decaf?
Yeah,
Or you
yeah.
want a grape, perhaps?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But then occasionally you, hit on something. For instance, you came up with the idea of Bells Are Ringing one day.
Right, right.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Another musical
That
from
took
New York
us
City.
about a year's sitting around.
To find the
Uh-huh.
idea.
We knew we wanted to do one for Judy.
It was for
Holland.
Judy.
Judy Holland.
And we just groaned and racked our minds, got with nothing. And then one day,
Well, looking at the back of a phone book, probably had to look up a number. We saw this picture of an answering service, Tel-Answer phone, with these rows of girls sitting at these polished walls of switchboards and plugging in numbers and the wires coming out of their heads, reaching all over the city. And we thought, now there's an idea for a show.
could be.
Could be.
And Betty said to me, well, you have an answering service.
What's it like?
What's it like? I said, gee, I don't know, must be something like that. So we found that my answering service, I was about a block from where I lived. We went over and, there was named kind of a
little brownstone. You went down
brownstone
3
house,
steps
yeah.
into the cellar, and it was very disheveled and
totally
dilapidated,
disheveled with
dirty and stuff, full of papers.
and doggies, peeing all over it. Things like that.
And one lone switchboard in the center,
Right.
and this very huge lady sitting at it, and she was saying, "Where's the Duke of Windsor's residence?" And we said, "Gee, there's got to be an idea here."
Yeah, yes.
So when you find the idea, well, what's the next step for you?
The next
Just
step
this
was
show
we called
specifically.
We called
Julie
Julie.
I said, do you like it? And he said, they've got to fall down.
And they were right. He was right.
Yeah. And,
No, he loved it. He was a man of great enthusiasm, as you must all know.
And then do you go to work with Julie, or do you guys go off and do the book, and he's off doing the...
Well, both in a way,
Yeah.
because of course, we'd start with the book.
Always with the
And
book. That's how
Judy
you
wouldn't
start.
sign until she'd read some of it. And even though we're the oldest friends and everything, she wanted to know what it was.
Yeah.
Any star would.
Sure.
So we did quite a bit of writing and got part of it. And then along the way, thought of songs. We always do that.
Yes.
Think of places.
Well, you read it to Judy.
Then I read it to Judy, and she loved it. So we knew we were set that she would
Yeah.
do it. It was a reality. So we
Yeah.
had her, and Jerry Robbins came in as the director, and we knew we were set. We just had to finish it. It took a long time, I must say.
Yes.
It was hard. It was a complicated plot, and but we were very, very. We sort of knew we had something there that was going to work in one way or another, and then we wrote. We wrote with Julie, and
Now I understand he was fast. I mean, he could give you like 5 or 6 songs,
Yes.
and if you didn't like
Yes.
him, he'd give you 5 or 6 more.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Oh, you don't like it?
exactly.
Well, how about this? You don't
Yes,
play,
yes.
which is a great quality.
Yeah.
In fact, all the composers we worked with are very generous people. I mean, they're all eccentric as hell, but generous.
Unlike us.
Yeah.
You guys just straight arrows, right? Completely.
and not stiff and proud or protective about stuff, but having the show at heart. That's the important thing, not an individual number or
And
something.
being dramatists in short, same as we were as book writers.
Yeah. A good show composer has to be a dramatist.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that a collaboration is like a marriage? I mean, of course you're not married. Many people do think that you are married, but
True.
you have separate lives outside of your private lives outside of your working room. But I mean, I guess it's like a marriage in the sense that how do you sustain it? I mean, Broadway is full of people who've had falling outs and putting the stiletto in somebody's back. How have you guys kept together all these years?
Well, we often say that we stayed together out of fear.
Fear, yes.
Simple fear of breaking up and not being able to do it.
Right. There's
I
a
don't
certain
know.
amount of
There's
truth
some
in that.
truth in that.
Yeah.
Now, aside from that, but it can be a little glib, though. I mean, it's funny you say
Yes,
fear, but
funny.
there's a little deeper than that. There must be a...
Well, I think we found it worked. The first show worked. I mean, On the Town took off and changed our lives.
Right.
And we just sort of stayed together. And I guess we're on the same wavelength. And we laugh at the same things. We have the same kind of humor.
And we've had a few ups and downs along
plenty,
the way.
And terrible failures along the way. I mean, why did we stay together after the failures?
Yeah, I mean, it's often the failure.
That was dumb, I guess, but we did.
You should have parted ways and you're on your own. But it's usually the failures. And, you know, you've had a lot of hits we've had here, but as anyone who works in the theater, you've had a couple of flops there, too.
Surely.
And that's got to be tough. I mean, how do you work that out if a show doesn't succeed? Do you say shit's
get
her
up
fault?
off
Do you
the
say it's his
floor and
fault?
go on.
No, you cry a lot, and then you get up and say, what next?
Well,
I think that George Abbott was a big example for us because he was a remarkable man, and you know how many shows and plays he did, but he never looked back. If something didn't work, well, no, what's next? What do we do now? And absolutely no remorse, none of those regrets, no quarterback, no
he did.
going
What did he do? And that wasn't my fault.
None of that with
just
him.
didn't work.
Yeah, all right, let's get to work, or let's do this. And he did that in his life. And I think he was a big example for us to try to do that.
Something seemed not to upset him too much. He lived to be 160 years old.
That's remarkable. I want to ask you about Wonderful Town, which is the third musical in this collection of your New York musicals. What was the germ of the idea? And it was based on My Sister Eileen, which was very famous.
And we didn't write the book.
Yeah,
actually,
we wrote the
lyrics.
The lyrics.
Not that we didn't.
I was going to say, was it hard for you not to meddle with the book?
We meddled.
We meddled quite a bit.
Did you get any royalties?
No, that didn't.
But, well, that was an adaptation of playing My Sister Eileen by Chatteroff and Fields.
Very funny play. Really is.
Yeah.
Wonderful characters and situations.
Was it always the idea to have Rosalind Russell?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
when
George,
we came in, it was.
George
Go ahead.
Abbott. And George Abbott, the same man, got in touch with us one way or another, asked if we could come in and sort of listen to a score that he had for a show that had no name yet. It was My Sister Eileen. And we listened to whatever there was, and just a couple of songs, and gee, we told him afterwards that, he said, could you write some additional ones? We said, I think it needs a whole new score.
Yeah.
He said, oh, really?
Then he wanted to know if we would just write the lyrics to what was there,
and could we do it in 4 weeks? Because otherwise, they'd lose Rosalind Russell to other commitments she would take. And then we went through a list of composers, and some were busy and so on. Finally mentioned Leonard Bernstein. He said, why don't you call him? And we didn't think he would do it in a zillion years. He had just gotten married to Felicia, and they were just coming back from their honeymoon. And
so we told George, well, yes, we'll go ask him. And so we did go to Lenny's house, and we no sooner got inside the door than the phone rang. It was George saying, well, is it yes or no?
Yeah. And oddly enough,
and Lenny said yes.
Said yes. We didn't think he would at all.
So we started that day really working, because we had so little time. He wanted to do it. And we have
and
a great
you did it in 4 weeks?
4 weeks. And,
4 weeks we did it.
And
now this is a book, the book that we're talking about today.
Yes.
It's a collection of your musicals. But I've heard through the grapevine that you guys are supposed to be working on a kind of a joint autobiography where you're going to just tell us everything about your lives and all the great backstage stories. Is that going to happen? Are we going to see that?
we're still about to do it. We hope so. Any minute, maybe. We should.
Maybe tonight, right?
Do you guys feel like legends of Broadway? I mean, they always say Comden and Green, they're legends. Do you guys feel like legends? What's it like to be a legend?
We feel we're potential.
You're right.
Isn't that what we feel?
Days,
We're still going to do
oddly enough,
something wonderful.
Feel one way potential that we've had all these many shows and movies that we've written, 8 or 9 films, and our evening of our own, but we've never felt that we've had that incredible success a show that runs forever.
Yeah, we haven't had that.
Yeah.
Okay. You want your Les Mis, your cats.
We're still hungry.
It's been a pleasure chatting with Betty Comden and Adolph Green. We look forward to that autobiography that you're going to deliver for us, right?
Right. And
so get to work.
We will.
Right.
And okay.
In the meantime, the New York musicals of Comden and Green, available at the bookstores everywhere, published by Applause.
Fame, if you win it, comes and goes in a minute. Where's the real stuff in life to cling to?
Now, Michael, I got this card in the mail. Beginning February 4th, Julie's back. So Tony Adams was right. She's coming back.
Tony Adams, the producer of Victor Victoria,
That's
was
right.
a guest on the show recently.
Last week. And Liza Minnelli has 3 days left.
Right. She's been in the show a month. Julie Andrews was taking a much-needed vacation to mend her broken bones, I think is how she put it. Well, Susan, we went to see Liza Minnelli, filling in for Julie Andrews, and I don't know about you, but I was underwhelmed, to say the least. I felt that the critics were very kind to Liza Minnelli, but as far as I was concerned, that performance was subpar. That was an amateur performance. You shouldn't have even been let near the stage.
Well, no. I, of course, don't feel strongly as you do because she's Liza. It was disappointing. Now, we saw her the third night she was in. She was a little...
She forgot her lines.
Well, we don't know that she forgot.
She can't sing.
She can't
sing. Dance. And she can't act.
See, she didn't dance very well. I thought her acting was fine.
All right. Granted, she's had a hip replacement, but still, that's no excuse.
I thought her costuming was unfortunate, and I felt that they could have done more with her part. But she is Liza Minnelli, daughter of Judy Garland, carrier of the dysfunctional mantle, and we love her.
I have never understood the allure, the attraction of Liza Minnelli, but maybe you, as someone who's a little older than I am, can explain why it is that, and even the drama critics, who are normally tough, somehow felt protective about Liza Minnelli. What is it about this woman? I mean, she's not particularly talented, and she's too short. What is it about this woman that people feel that they have to look out for her?
It's the camera on me now. What is it, viewers, about Liza Minnelli? And what is it that Michael Riedel can't see? How can I explain it to you if you don't know? She is vulnerable, and at the same time, she's up there, she's still alive, she's still walking around, she's in that show, and we love her. And there's just something about, and it is the legacy of her mother, and they very wisely staged certain parts of the things, taking out dances that she probably couldn't have done very well, and had her sing songs, because she does now look like her mother did in the last years of her mother's life, and that was
that's a good look.
I'll tell you, you and I were disappointed, but then our director was telling me, everybody's calling me saying Liza is the most fabulous thing. What can you do? They sold all the tickets.
All I can say is thank God Julie Andrews is back, because Liza makes her look like a giant.
All right. Now they've postponed the opening date of Titanic.
Right, Titanic, the new musical, of course, about the sinking of the Titanic, from Maury Eston, the composer, and Peter Stone, the book writer, was going to open toward the end of April. They've pushed those dates back a bit. There was an erroneous report in the New York Post, which often gets things wrong, saying that Titanic might not come to Broadway at all. That is absolutely not true. I've talked to the creators of the show, and they said that the delay was caused by some problems with the set and rehearsal scheduling. But the show is ready to go. The word of mouth on it from people who have seen backers auditions for it is pretty good. I think the thing with Titanic, it's a hit or miss show. You know, I mean, it's either going to be a big hit and people are going to be surprised that a show called Titanic can sail on Broadway, or it's going to be a big flop and everyone's going to be laughing and saying, how foolish can you be to have done a show about the Titanic as a musical?
Are they doing some incredible sinking of the ship thing?
They are. They're trying to keep that under wraps, but I actually talked to a couple of actors who auditioned for the role, and I do know that they passed up on a couple of older actors because apparently for most of the second act, the people who drowned in the Titanic are suspended by wires high above the stage, which would indicate that part of the show is sort of set underwater, I guess, and they're floating up on top. And they had to hire younger actors who could sort of be Peter Pan up there in the flies for most of the second act.
Tommy Tune was developing this show.
Originally, Tommy Tune was directing the show. That's right. He was developing it with Peter Stone, whom he worked on the Will Rogers Follies with.
Yes.
But he pulled out of it for reasons that were never really explained. Like any Broadway director, I suppose you lose your interest wanes in a project and you move on to something else. Richard Jones, a terrific actor, terrific director from England, is helming this production. The captain of this ship, we should say.
All right, that's all for till next time. Send in your cards on the Comden and Green trivia question. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Who's the